Let's talk about some domestic news here. In a blow to President Trump's continued claims, including last night, that American jobs are coming back to this country, General Motors has announced it will lay off more than 14,000 of its employees. The automaker announced it is slashing the factory and white-collar jobs yesterday, adding it would possibly close up to 5 plants. Factories that could face closure include assembly plants in Detroit and Oshawa, Ontario, and Lordstown, Ohio, as well as transmission plants in Warren, Michigan, and one near Baltimore. The company says the moves are a part of a restructuring effort to cut costs and focus on autonomous and electric vehicles. In the aftermath of the announcement, a White House official told NBC News yesterday that economic advisor Larry Kudlow was expected to meet with GM CEO Mary Barra. Speaking yesterday, President Trump says he spoke with Barra and that he's not happy with the company's decision.
Well, we don't like it. I believe they'll be opening up something else. And I was very tough. I spoke with her when I heard they were closing. And I said, you know, this country's done a lot for General Motors. So we have a lot of pressure on them. You have senators, you have a lot of other people, a lot of pressure.
This is the front page story in most of the major newspapers across the country today. GM to close plants and cut jobs. Gene Robinson. The first thing is you got 14,000, almost 15,000 people who will be out of work. That's the most important part of this. But it does, again, cut across the narrative that President Trump was putting out there during the campaign and again as president, that manufacturing jobs will rush back into the United States with him in the White House.
Yeah, and he promised a lot of things. He promised manufacturing jobs would rush back in, and they're not doing that. He promised that the coal industry would come back, and that's not happening. He promised that U.S. Steel would open 6 to 8 new plants, and they are opening 0 new plants. I mean, it was all lies, and the lies are being exposed as lies, and there will be a political impact. In Ohio, GM is closing a plant called the Lordstown plant. It's near Youngstown. I remember years ago, back when I was in college and had friends who lived in Ohio in that area, the Mahoning Valley. You know, Lordstown, it was in many ways as a sort of iconic symbol of GM. It's a huge plant, 6 million square feet, and of course it had been, there had been fewer and fewer jobs there over the years, and finally it was down to, I think, just a couple of thousand jobs. But the symbolic importance for the state of Ohio of the closing of the Lordstown plant is huge, and it's something that better not escape President Trump's notice. This is a very bad thing for him politically in Ohio.
Well, I think first and foremost, it's just devastating for these families.
Right.
I mean, 14 to 15,000 families are going to have to wonder about their future right now, and that can't get lost in this conversation. I think secondarily, the context here is important, which is people aren't buying these cars in the way that GM thought that they were going to be. And GM had to make a free market decision about what to do about that. Now, that's where you have a question about what the government should do in those situations. First and foremost, will the government come in and help these people out, whether it's through unemployment insurance or some sort of measure to actually get them on their feet again? We showed that government was able to move mountains to get a corporate tax cut passed. Will they do the same to help the workers out here? And then I think thirdly, the broader question we have to ask is, does the government, lawmakers, have a role to play in transitioning our economy into some sort of more forward-looking, future-based economy that doesn't necessarily have to rely on these manufacturing jobs and the whims of the market? What the Trump administration has basically said is, no, we're going to look backwards. We're going to go back to coal, steel, automobiles, and so on and so forth. I wonder if this sparks a renewed interest, but my suspicion is it will not.
Well, I think that this could be one of the most significant news developments as it relates to 2020 election. This could be the canary in the coal mine. And to your point, Sam, the president promised to take us back to a time in the past when we had coal plants and steel plants and car manufacturers. And what's happening with GM right now, remember, it was bailed out 10 years ago by the government, that they failed to anticipate the future, and the future was a different kind of car, and they made a bet on fuel prices, and they bet wrong, and now they got to deal with those free market consequences. So government can't come in and fix a bad decision like that only the free market can fix.
Well, and also you look at how Donald Trump has, attempted to just use a tourniquet and contain short-term damage, looking to the past by, one-off ad hoc private, intervention into the free market, picking winners and losers, and it's not sustainable over the long term.
Totally.
And you look at how this plays out with trade policy too, and how his, how soybean prices, 98% of soybeans that were sold to China last year weren't sold, so that sales completely plummeted. So what do we have? We have a $16 billion bailout to farmers that's adding to the deficit.
Yeah,
so
the first stop Trump made, and this is before he was president, was to the Carrier plant in Indianapolis. Carrier had been planning to move jobs to Mexico, and he intervened personally, and he declared that he saved that plant. The reality is they kept laying people off, just not in the numbers that were initially anticipated. But it goes to show you that a plan in which the president has to personally intervene and talk with the CEO in order to get them to stop shipping jobs overseas is not really a plan at all. It's totally reliant on Trump's time and attention, both of which we know he has very little of. And so you need to actually develop a comprehensive plan that looks at the possibility of outsourcing and deals with it. And they could have done it through the tax overhaul. They didn't do it through tax overhaul, and now they're stuck with this.
Yeah, I mean, if this is going to be a 2020 indicator, it's not just the car industry, because you've got lower numbers in industrial production, you've got lower numbers at the moment in retail sales, you've got lower numbers in housing as well.
Yeah.
Economies are cyclical. Every economist will tell you that. We've been up on a boom. The question is, when does it start dipping down again, and how seriously does it dip down in the run-up to the 2020 election? And that is something, Peter Baker, that President Trump is going to have to deal with. He's owned the economy so far. He may be able to say this was all the Democrats' fault. Look, you put the Democrats in control of the House, and that is why we have some kind of a downturn in the economy going into the next election. I wonder whether voters will bite, and if that is the thing that peels away some of his base that has been so loyal to him up until now.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. I mean, his approval ratings, of course, have always been roughly in the low to mid-40s, sometimes dipping below that. Clearly held up in part by the fact that the economy has been doing well. Otherwise, it might fall further. And we saw these numbers that I think came out today about the House elections. 53% of voters chose Democrats in these midterm elections versus 45% who chose Republicans. That's an 8-point gap, much larger than the 3-point gap that the Democrats won the popular vote in 2016. So you've got to be worried about that if you're President Trump's strategist looking ahead. The thing that has kept him going so well has been the economy. If that's beginning to turn around, that undercuts the single most powerful and resonant argument that he's had with the electorate.
Yeah, GM CEO Mary Barra saying, "We made a business decision here to keep our company alive." In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, President Trump says, quote, "They better damn well open a new plant there very quickly," talking about the state of Ohio. Peter Baker, thank you very much. Mark McKinnon, before you go, Mississippi tonight. Democrat Mike Espy, can he pull an upset against Cindy Hyde-Smith?
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I don't think, as you said, Alabama's a little different than Mississippi, but this could be a win-loss situation for Republicans, too, where if they win, they may get a substandard standard bearer in the Senate, which creates more longer-term consequences.
We'll be watching. Mark McKinnon, thanks so much. Always good to see you. Still ahead on Morning Joe. It's an issue that has split some top Republicans, criminal justice reform. We'll talk to Senator Mike Lee about that and what he says to colleagues like Tom Cotton, who are trying to pump the brakes. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.